It was one of those warm, golden evenings that felt almost too peaceful to be real. The smell of butter and maple syrup filled the kitchen while I flipped pancakes the way Sophie loves them, thin around the edges, soft in the center. Michael poured orange juice, pretending everything between us was still easy. Laughter echoed through the house as Sophie tried to balance a blueberry on her fork. For a moment, I let myself believe this was happiness, that maybe, just maybe, we were okay. The three of us sat around the table, and it looked like a scene from someone else's perfect life. The sound of clinking forks, the hum of the ceiling fan, the glow of the pendant light. Everything felt calm, safe, ordinary. Sophie's cheeks were sticky with syrup, and her giggles melted the quiet. I caught Michael's smile across the table and thought, maybe we found our rhythm again. I didn't know that one small sentence was about to split that illusion wide open. Sophie, mid-bite and beaming at me, said it so innocently it almost sounded sweet. "Mommy, your pancakes are yummy, but the blonde lady's pancakes are yummy too." My fork froze midair. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. The room went oddly quiet, like the air itself was listening. I glanced at Michael, and he looked down at his plate a little too quickly. My heart began to drum in that quiet, familiar rhythm it takes on when something's wrong, but you can't name it yet. I smiled, soft and steady, trying to sound casual. "The blonde lady?" I asked. "What blonde lady, sweetie?" Sophie didn't even blink. "The one who makes pancakes for me when Daddy picks me up from school," she said, her voice all sunshine and innocence. "She has long yellow hair and smells like flowers." I could almost hear Michael swallow his breath beside me. The air thickened between us, sweet syrup turning bitter on my tongue. "Sophie, eat your dinner," he muttered, his voice tight, too tight for a simple misunderstanding. I didn't let it drop. "It's okay," I told him, keeping my tone soft, almost gentle. "I just want to know. Who is this woman, Michael?" He laughed, nervous, forced, a sound that didn't fit the moment. "It's just my coworker, Jenna," he said. "I stopped by her place once after picking Sophie up. Her kid was there. They made pancakes together. It's innocent." I watched his face as he spoke. Every blink, every pause. "Once?" I asked. "Maybe twice," he said, eyes flicking away. "You're overthinking, honey." I smiled, but it wasn't the kind that reached my eyes. It was the kind you wear when you're done pretending you don't see the fire behind the curtain. Sophie kept humming to herself, cutting her pancakes into little hearts, while Michael tried to act unbothered. I nodded, let him think I'd swallowed his story whole. The trick, I've learned, is silence. It unsettles liars more than accusations ever could. So I just said, "Of course," and passed him the syrup like nothing had changed. Inside, though, something shifted. It wasn't rage, at least not yet. It was more like a quiet unlocking, a door in my chest creaking open. I thought about all the times I'd brushed off my instincts, the late meetings, the extra work calls, the scent of perfume that wasn't mine lingering in his car. Maybe I had been overthinking, but only because the truth had been whispering louder each time I tried to ignore it. When dinner ended, Sophie skipped off to her room, leaving behind her sticky fingerprints and that innocent little bomb she'd dropped. Michael kissed my cheek, pretending we were fine. I kissed him back, pretending harder. But in my head, I was already somewhere else, somewhere quiet, with answers waiting to be found. That night, I tucked Sophie into bed like always. She wrapped her tiny arms around my neck, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Good night, Mommy." I smiled, brushed her hair back, and whispered it back. My voice was soft, but my mind was anything but. Down the hallway, Michael sat on the couch scrolling through his phone, as if the world hadn't tilted just hours earlier. I watched him for a moment, his calm, his ease, and something inside me decided that peace was no longer my priority. When the house finally went quiet, I moved through it like a ghost. every step deliberate, every sound measured. I took his car keys from the bowl by the door and walked to the garage, the air thick with motor oil and dust. My hands didn't shake. Funny how still you can be when your heart is breaking. I opened the glove compartment, expecting nothing, maybe hoping for nothing. But there it was, a small receipt folded neatly, waiting for me like a secret that wanted to be found. 2 bouquets. White lilies and pink tulips, a message card, for my sunshine. My breath hitched. My fingers tightened around the paper until it crinkled. Sunshine. That wasn't me. I hadn't been his sunshine in a long time. He'd made sure of that. I leaned back in the seat, the leather cold against my skin, and whispered her name like a confession. Jenna. The next morning, I moved through the kitchen on autopilot. Coffee brewing, pancakes sizzling, Sophie's laughter floating in the air like nothing had changed. But everything had. Every glance at Michael felt heavier now, coated in doubt. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, and I let him, pretending the warmth didn't sting. The moment the door shut, I grabbed my keys. There was only one place I needed to go. The flower shop smelled like sugar and forgiveness. Rows of roses and lilies lined the walls, too beautiful for what they represented. I walked up to the counter, my voice calm, polite, practiced. "Hi, I'm checking on an order from Michael Reed," I said, smiling like a woman who didn't already know the answer. The florist tapped her keyboard, humming. "Yes," she said brightly. 2 bouquets delivered last week to 27 Willow Street. 27 Willow Street. The words sat heavy on my tongue, sweet and poisonous all at once. I thanked her, holding that practiced smile until I stepped outside. The sunlight felt harsh now, like it was exposing something. I got in my car, typed the address into my GPS, and drove. Just a few blocks from Sophie's school, I saw her, the blonde woman from my daughter's story, watering plants by the porch. Her hair shimmered like gold in the afternoon light. She looked soft, harmless, maybe even kind. I watched her for a long minute and thought, so this is where my husband spends his afternoons. I sat there for a while, parked down the street, watching her. She laughed into her phone, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her movements easy, unguarded. She didn't look like the villain in my story, but that didn't make her innocent. Somewhere between her laughter and the way she adjusted the strap of her sundress, I felt something in me harden. I wasn't going to cry. Not for him. Not for her. Not anymore. On the drive home, I rolled down the window just to feel the air cut through the silence. The city passed in a blur. Traffic lights, strangers, storefronts. All of it strangely distant, like I was moving through someone else's life. But beneath that numbness, a quiet clarity began to form. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't clueless. And I wasn't going to confront him until I had everything I needed. Every proof, every lie, every name. That night, I slipped into bed beside Michael. He turned toward me in his sleep, his arm brushing mine like nothing had changed. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. I'd seen her face. I knew her name. And soon, I'd know everything else. The truth was no longer a wound. It was a weapon I was learning to hold. For the next few days, I played my part perfectly. I laughed when Michael told his tired jokes, kissed him goodnight, even packed his lunches with little notes. The kind I used to write when we were newly married. He thought it meant I'd softened. I let him. In truth, every smile I gave was a mirror, reflecting his lies back at him. If guilt didn't eat him alive, evidence would. I just needed time. I started small, checking his phone when he showered, glancing at his texts while pretending to fold laundry. At first, nothing. Then, little by little, the cracks appeared. A message from Jay with a heart emoji. Dinner charges at a restaurant he'd never taken me to. Voicemails saved under his work folder, one of them a woman's voice. Warm, careless, saying, "Love you. Can't wait to see you." Each discovery burned like acid and clarity all at once. Every night I'd tuck Sophie in, kiss her forehead, and whisper that everything was okay, maybe trying to convince myself too. But once her door closed, the game resumed. The more I uncovered, the calmer I became. Betrayal has a strange effect like that. At first it breaks you, then it sharpens you. And somewhere in that quiet sharpening, I began to plan my revenge, not out of rage, but precision. By the end of the week, my patience had turned into power. I wasn't rushing toward confrontation anymore. I was orchestrating it. Every text he sent, every late meeting, every unexplained charge became a piece of the puzzle I was carefully fitting together. I screenshotted messages, printed bank statements, saved voicemails. My kitchen drawer, the one where we used to keep family recipes, became my archive of betrayal. Funny, isn't it? The things we store in places meant for love. Michael had no idea. He moved through the house as if nothing had shifted. He'd wrap his arms around me from behind while I was cooking, and I'd smile, steady and practiced, while my mind wandered to the evidence I'd collected that day. Every lie he spoke was like a thread, and I was already pulling. But I wanted more than proof. I wanted irony. I wanted him to choke on the same sweetness he'd used to deceive me. So one night, after Sophie was asleep, I borrowed his phone. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I opened his messages, found Jenna's contact, and typed, "Let's have breakfast together again Sunday. Pancakes like last time." I hit send, then stared at the screen, my reflection faint against the glass. Sunday, the day our family used to belong to. Now it would belong to me. The days leading up to Sunday were almost eerily peaceful. Michael hummed while shaving, kissed me before leaving for work, and even brought home flowers one night. Lilies, as if I wouldn't recognize the gesture. I thanked him, arranging them neatly in a vase, right next to the drawer that held the proof of his deceit. He thought he was covering his tracks. I was just letting him. There's a strange kind of satisfaction in watching someone lie to your face when you already know the truth. I made sure everything appeared normal. Saturday night, I helped Sophie pack her school bag, folded laundry, even planned to visit my mother the next morning. Michael didn't suspect a thing. He kissed my forehead and told me to drive safe. I smiled, memorizing the look on his face, the last moment before his world began to collapse. Revenge doesn't always come in fire and fury. Sometimes it's quiet, like the calm before a storm that's already decided where it'll strike. That night, lying in bed, I rehearsed it in my mind. The drive, the door, the confrontation. Not with anger, but precision. I wasn't walking into chaos. I was walking into closure. As Michael drifted off beside me, I stared into the dark, my heartbeat steady. He'd chosen his battlefield: pancakes, laughter, the comfort of someone else's kitchen. But he'd forgotten who taught him how to keep the flame steady. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive brightness. Sunlight poured through the curtains, soft and golden, the kind that makes everything look pure. I packed Sophie's overnight bag and kissed her forehead, telling her we were going to Grandma's. Her eyes lit up. She loved those visits. But I wasn't driving to my mother's. I was driving toward the truth. The road felt longer than usual, though my hands stayed steady on the wheel. Sometimes revenge isn't fire, it's focus. When I turned onto Willow Street, my pulse didn't race. I'd already made peace with what I was about to see. I parked a few houses down, my engine purring low, and watched through the window. There they were, Michael and Jenna standing side by side in her kitchen, flipping pancakes like it was a family ritual. He laughed, that easy, careless laugh I used to love. She brushed flour off his shirt. The sight was almost domestic, almost sweet, and utterly poisonous. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking against the pavement, the sound slicing through the quiet street. As I reached the door, I didn't knock. I simply turned the handle. It wasn't locked. Fitting, really, how open he'd left his lies. I pushed it open and walked in, the smell of butter and coffee hitting me like memory turned cruel. Both of them froze, spatulas midair, eyes wide. And for a heartbeat, we were all silent. Then Jenna whispered, How did you—" I took one slow step inside, my eyes sweeping over the scene, the messy counter, the half-poured syrup, the nervous flicker in Michael's eyes. "Oh, don't stop on my account," I said, my voice smooth, almost kind. "I was just wondering how you like your pancakes. My daughter says yours are almost as good as mine." The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. Jenna blinked, her cheeks coloring as she glanced at Michael. He looked like a man halfway through a nightmare he'd written himself. "Laura, please, this isn't—" he started, but I raised my hand. "Save it," I said. "Sophie told me everything. And you two? You're pathetic. You play house with my child while serving lies for breakfast." I could feel my own pulse in my throat, but my tone never wavered. I pulled the folder from my bag, printed texts, screenshots, receipts, and dropped it on the counter beside the spatula. "Here's your meal prep for the week," I told him. "My lawyer's contact, proof of your affair, and your court date. Bon appetit." Jenna tried to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. I didn't care enough to find out. I turned to her, my smile cold, deliberate. "I hope you like making pancakes for men who can't afford syrup once I'm done with him," I said quietly. For the first time, Michael didn't have words, just that look, the one that begged for forgiveness he'd already spent. I let the silence sit there, let it sting. Then I turned toward the door, calm, composed, done. I didn't slam the door or shout or demand tears. I simply walked out, each step measured, the morning air cool against my face. Behind me, I could hear nothing. No excuses, no pleas, not even the sound of the spatula hitting the floor. Just silence. The kind that follows when the truth finally lands. My hands trembled for the first time all day, but it wasn't fear. It was release. The weight of pretending finally lifting off my shoulders. The sunlight felt different now, almost cleansing. I got into my car, started the engine, and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. There was no makeup smudged, no tears streaking down my face, just a woman who'd stopped begging to be believed. For the first time in a long while, I saw strength instead of survival. Revenge wasn't fire and fury. It was walking away untouched while everything behind you burned in its own guilt. As I drove off, I passed Sophie's school, quiet, empty, safe. That small building suddenly meant everything. My daughter would grow up knowing love could be rebuilt, even if trust couldn't. Michael thought he'd found comfort in another kitchen, but all he'd done was hand me the recipe for his undoing. And this time, I'd make sure he tasted every bite of it. The week that followed felt oddly calm, like the air after a thunderstorm. Michael's world began to unravel faster than I could have planned. The divorce papers arrived at his office before he did. His boss received an anonymous email, one that included a few of those innocent texts between him and Jenna. HR called it a breach of professional conduct. I called it karma finally finding its way home. I didn't need to shout or gloat. I just watched the dominoes fall, one by one. Jenna disappeared from his life almost immediately. I heard through a mutual friend that she quit her job, blocked his number, and moved in with her sister out of state. It turns out, mistresses don't like being the headline of someone else's downfall. Meanwhile, Michael called and texted, his messages shifting from denial to desperation. I didn't reply to any of them. Every vibration of my phone reminded me that silence was power, and I wasn't giving that up again. At night, I'd sit by Sophie's bed, watching her sleep peacefully, her small hand curled around her blanket. I thought about how easily lies can poison a home, how quickly truth can clean it. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. Watching his chaos from a distance was enough. It was like standing on the shore after a storm, knowing the waves would never reach you again. It was Friday evening when he finally showed up. I heard the knock before I saw him through the glass. Shoulders slumped, tie loose, eyes hollow. The kind of man who suddenly realizes the walls around him weren't home, just habit. I opened the door halfway, enough to let him see me, not enough to let him in. "Laura," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, I made a mistake. Don't take Sophie away from me." His words hung in the air, heavy, like the perfume of something that had already died. "She's not the one you need to worry about losing," I said softly. "I am." For a second, he just stared at me, like he didn't understand the language of finality. "I can change," he whispered. I shook my head. "You already did," I told him. "From husband to stranger." The look in his eyes, part regret, part disbelief, might have broken me once, not now. I'd already buried the version of me that begged for his honesty. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back, letting the distance speak for me. "Laura, please," he started, but I cut him off gently. "Go home, Michael," I said, "wherever that is now." And then I closed the door. It didn't slam. It clicked. Quiet, final, clean. On the other side, he stood in silence. On mine, the air felt lighter than it had in years. After he left, the house was silent. Truly silent. Not the uneasy quiet of suspicion or grief, but the kind that hums with freedom. I walked through each room slowly, noticing how light fell differently now. The space that once felt heavy with his absence now felt full of mine. I made tea, sat by the window, and realized that revenge hadn't just been about punishing him. It had been about reclaiming myself. Every lie I uncovered, every truth I faced, had pulled me closer to the woman I used to be before I started apologizing for my instincts. Days turned into weeks. Papers were signed. His name began to fade from the mail, from the phone bill, from my thoughts. Sophie laughed louder, slept deeper. She stopped asking when Daddy was coming home, and when she finally did, her voice didn't sound sad. It sounded curious, distant, like a question she no longer needed answered. Watching her heal made me believe I could too. We were starting over. Just us, and that was enough. One night, I found the old pancake pan pushed to the back of a cabinet. I pulled it out, ran my fingers along its worn handle, and smiled. It wasn't a symbol of family anymore. It was a reminder of strength, of how even something ordinary can survive the heat and come out stronger. I set it on the counter, knowing I'd use it again soon, but this time on my terms. Months later, the mornings felt different. Lighter, simpler, mine. The apartment wasn't big, but it was ours. Sunlight spilled across the counter as Sophie sat on a stool, swinging her legs, watching me pour batter into the pan. "Mommy, are we going to see Daddy today?" she asked, her voice innocent, curious. I flipped a pancake and smiled. "Not today, sweetheart. It's just us this morning." Her eyes lit up. "Yay, you make the best pancakes." And in that small, ordinary moment, something inside me settled, a peace that tasted better than forgiveness. I watched her drizzle syrup over her plate, her laughter filling the room. There was no tension, no waiting for a door to open or a lie to fall apart. Just the sound of forks on plates and the soft hum of a new beginning. I thought about how much had changed, how pain, when faced head-on, eventually folds into strength. The kind you don't have to prove, only live. I reached for my coffee, took a sip, and let the quiet wrap around us like a warm blanket. Looking at Sophie, I realized I'd built something stronger than the home I lost: honesty, simplicity, safety. She'd never know all the details of what happened, and she didn't need to. All she'd remember was that her mother stood up, rebuilt, and still made pancakes on Sundays. Only this time they weren't a ritual of routine. They were a recipe for peace.